Welcome back to Women of Worth, the podcast where we empower women to take charge of their lives and well-being. I'm your host. Today, we're diving into a topic that's transformative yet often overlooked: setting boundaries. Do you ever feel like you're constantly giving but rarely receiving the respect or space you deserve? Or maybe you've tried setting boundaries but struggled to maintain them without feeling guilty. Trust me, you're not alone. Boundaries are the unsung heroes of a balanced, peaceful life. And today we're going to explore why they're so essential, especially for women juggling multiple roles. In this episode, we'll break down the different types of boundaries every woman should have, from emotional and physical to time and digital boundaries. We'll also tackle how to handle challenging personalities, like those who ignore or push against your limits. And, of course, we'll provide real-life strategies to help you set and protect boundaries confidently and gracefully. So, if you're ready to reclaim your time, your energy, and your peace, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and tap the bell so you never miss an episode. And we want to hear from you. What's one boundary you've set that's changed your life? Drop it in the comments below. We'd love to share your insights in future episodes. Let's get started and uncover the power of boundaries together.
Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. We're tackling boundaries today.
Oh, boundaries.
Yeah, those invisible lines that can be, well, honestly, kind of tricky sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of people struggle with them.
Exactly. But they're so important, not just for healthy relationships, but for our own well-being, too. You know, for this deep dive, we're looking at this piece. It's mainly focused on women and boundaries, but
I think a lot of the points apply to, well, anyone really.
I think so. Financial stress. And get this, the source breaks boundaries down into 7 types.
But before we get into all the different types, let's talk about why boundaries are so crucial in the first place.
Well, think of boundaries like your own personal set of guidelines for how you want to be treated. You're protecting your peace, your energy, and even your self-worth.
So it's not selfish to have boundaries.
No, not at all. It's actually the opposite. When you have healthy boundaries, you're more likely to have healthy relationships.
Because everyone knows where they stand. You're less likely to get resentful or build up all those unspoken frustrations.
Yeah, that makes sense. The source uses Olivia, a project manager, as an example.
Oh yeah, Olivia.
She was constantly bombarded with work calls after hours, which was burning her out, just totally stressing her out.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Right. So she decided to set a simple boundary. She let her team know she wouldn't be available after 7 p.m. It made a huge difference. She was able to reclaim her evenings and actually relax.
Simple but effective. I love that.
Right. It's like setting that expectation early on. So now let's get to those 7 types of boundaries, because I'm really curious about this.
Me too. 7 is a lot.
It is. It's like this whole toolkit we didn't know we had. So first up, let's talk about physical boundaries.
Okay, physical boundaries.
What exactly falls under that category?
So it's really about your personal space, your comfort level with touch and physical closeness.
Like if someone goes in for a hug and you're not feeling it?
Exactly. It's totally okay to politely decline. You get to decide who touches you and how.
That's a good point. It's about respecting our own bodies.
It's about respecting yourself and other people respecting that too.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, what about emotional boundaries? These seem trickier to navigate.
Yeah, emotional boundaries can be tough.
They are. So much harder than physical ones.
You're protecting your emotional well-being, not letting other people's emotions drain you or manipulate you.
Oh, like that feeling of being obligated to share personal stuff when you're not ready.
Exactly. You wouldn't let just anyone walk into your home and rearrange your furniture, right?
True.
Emotional boundaries are kind of like that. They protect your inner world, what you choose to share and with whom.
I love that analogy. So any practical tips for setting those types of boundaries?
Well, the source gives the example of refusing to engage in gossip. Like imagine you're with a group and the conversation turns negative.
Oh, I've been there. It's so awkward.
It does. And instead of just going along with it, you can say something like, I'm not comfortable talking about this.
Straightforward and to the point.
Right. You're not being aggressive, but you are being assertive.
I like that. Okay, moving on to time boundaries. I think in today's world, we can all relate to feeling stretched thin.
Oh, yeah. Time is precious. It's like our most valuable resource these days.
It really is. So how do time boundaries fit in?
Time boundaries are about valuing your time, learning to say no to commitments that drain you or just don't align with your priorities.
The source mentions scheduling me time without guilt. And I love that, like actually putting it on the calendar.
Yes,
Yeah.
so important because it's so easy to feel like we need to be on all the time.
Right, like constantly productive or available to everyone else.
But you can't pour from an empty cup, you know? You need time to recharge, even if it's just 30 minutes to read or take a walk.
Totally agree. So what about those situations where we feel obligated to say yes, even when every cell in our body is screaming no?
Oh, I know that feeling. It's tough.
It is. So how do we handle those situations? Like how do we push past that feeling of obligation?
First, remind yourself you have the right to say no. You really don't need to over-explain or make excuses.
I feel like I always feel the need to justify myself.
I think a lot of us do. But sometimes a simple thank you for thinking of me, but I can't make it is enough.
Less is more.
Exactly. You don't owe anyone a lengthy explanation.
All right, I'm going to work on that. What's the next type of boundary?
Let's see, material boundaries.
Okay, material boundaries. So we're talking about possessions and money.
Yeah, like setting limits around lending things or sharing your finances.
So it's like if a friend asks to borrow your car for the weekend and you're not comfortable with that.
Exactly. Or maybe someone asks for a loan and you know it would put you in a tough spot financially. You have every right to say no.
This makes me think of that saying, don't set yourself on fire to keep others warm.
Yes, that's a good one. Protect your resources.
Okay, what about intellectual boundaries? This is a new one for me.
Yeah, this one is interesting. It's about respecting differences of opinion.
Oh, okay. So not feeling the need to debate every single point.
Exactly. You don't need to convert everyone to your way of thinking. It's okay to agree to disagree.
That's so important, especially these days when it feels like everyone's got such strong opinions about everything.
It's about choosing your battles.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, now onto a topic that can be a bit more sensitive. Sexual boundaries.
Yes. Important, but definitely sensitive.
What are the key things to keep in mind with this type of boundary?
Clear communication is essential here. Being upfront about your comfort levels and expectations with a partner.
And ensuring both partners feel safe and respected.
Absolutely. It's about making sure everyone's needs and boundaries are acknowledged and respected.
Okay, last but not least, digital boundaries.
Oh, digital boundaries. This is a big one these days.
It really is. What comes to mind when you think about digital boundaries?
Well, it's about setting limits on your online presence, how much you share, who you connect with, and how much time you spend online.
So things like limiting your social media use or being selective about who you follow.
Exactly. And maybe setting specific times to check emails instead of being constantly connected.
So it's about protecting your time and energy in the digital world.
And your privacy, too.
Good point.
Yeah.
Wow, those 7 types really do cover a lot of ground. It's amazing to see how each one plays such a specific role in our overall well-being.
Yeah, it's like having this whole toolbox of strategies to create a life that feels more balanced and respectful.
But how do we even know if our own boundaries need some work? What are some signs we should be looking out for?
Well, I think a big one is that feeling of obligation. You know, like saying yes to everything, even when you're already swamped.
Yes.
I think a lot of us can relate to that. And it ties into another sign, putting other people's needs before your own constantly.
Oh, yeah. Like being a people pleaser to the point where you're sacrificing your own well-being.
Exactly. The source also mentions, let me see. Oh, yeah. Letting others dictate your decisions.
Ooh, that's a good one. So it's like we're giving away our power in a way.
Kind of, yeah. It's about recognizing that you have a choice in how you respond to things.
The source talks about Maria, a teacher who always felt pressured to lend money to her sister, even though it was causing her financial stress.
It can be tough to set those boundaries, especially with family.
It really can. But the interesting thing is, once Maria finally set that boundary, her relationship with her sister actually improved.
It's like setting that clear expectation created a healthier dynamic, less resentment, more respect.
That's a powerful reminder that boundaries can actually strengthen relationships, not damage them.
Yeah.
Okay, so we know the why, but what about the how? Setting boundaries can feel so awkward, especially if we're not used to it.
Yeah. For sure. It's a skill you have to practice.
So where do we even begin?
Well, the source breaks it down into some manageable steps. And the first one is to start small. Don't try to overhaul your whole life at once.
So pick one area where you feel that a boundary is needed.
Yeah, like maybe it's carving out 30 minutes each day for yourself uninterrupted, or saying no to that extra project at work.
Baby steps. Got it. What's the next step?
Communication. Being clear about your needs. The source emphasizes using I statements.
Oh, I've heard about that. So instead of saying, you always interrupt me, it would be more like, I feel frustrated when I'm interrupted. Could you please let me finish my thought?
Exactly. It focuses on your experience without blaming the other person.
Less accusatory, more about how it makes you feel.
Exactly. Now, of course, you might encounter some pushback when you start setting boundaries.
Right, because not everyone's going to be happy about it.
Some people are used to getting their way, or maybe they benefit from you not having boundaries.
Oh, that's a good point. So how do we handle that pushback?
Don't over-explain or apologize. Just restate your boundary calmly and clearly.
So if someone keeps pushing, what do we do?
You can say something like, I understand you might not like this, but it's important to me. And if they continue to disrespect that boundary, you might need to distance yourself from that person a bit.
That can be tough, especially if it's someone close to you.
It can be, but sometimes it's necessary for your own well-being.
The source also cautions against being controlling with boundaries. So how do we walk that line?
Well, remember, it's about protecting yourself, not dictating how others should behave. You can't control anyone else's actions.
So it's about setting that limit for yourself, how you'll respond, rather than trying to manipulate the other person.
Exactly.
And the last point the source makes is about self-reflection. How does that tie into boundaries?
Boundaries aren't static. They might need to evolve as you grow and your circumstances change. So regularly check in with yourself.
So it's not a one-time fix, it's an ongoing process.
Exactly. Maybe a boundary that worked before isn't serving you anymore. Or maybe you need to set a firmer boundary in a certain area of your life.
Okay, that makes sense. What about dealing with someone who's really challenging, like a narcissist? Someone who seems to just bulldoze over boundaries.
Oh, that's a tough one.
Because narcissists, they thrive on attention and control.
They do. So they might resist your boundaries pretty strongly.
So what's the best way to handle those types of personalities?
Stay calm, be assertive, and consistent. Don't get sucked into their drama or attempts to manipulate you.
The source mentions using clear, concise statements like, I'm not going to discuss this anymore, and then actually sticking to it.
Exactly. It's about setting that limit and enforcing it. Actions speak louder than words.
So what if someone just flat out ignores your boundaries?
Then you might need to set consequences, like limiting contact or even ending the relationship if it's toxic.
So it's about protecting yourself in those situations.
It is. You have the right to remove yourself from unhealthy dynamics.
Now, the source also addresses setting boundaries within marriage, which can feel even trickier.
It can be. Because there's that element of intimacy and closeness.
Exactly. So how do we balance that with healthy boundaries?
Boundaries in marriage aren't about creating distance. They're about ensuring mutual respect and preventing resentment.
It makes sense. The source mentions communicating your need for alone time without guilt.
Yes. Recognizing that even in the closest relationships, we all need our own space sometimes.
So it's about creating a dynamic where both partners feel comfortable expressing their needs.
And respecting those needs.
Okay, I like that. There's one more concept from the source that I found really interesting, and that's the idea of a high-value woman. What exactly does that mean?
The source describes a high-value woman as someone who knows her worth, demands respect, and prioritizes her own growth and well-being.
So it's about self-respect, self-awareness, and living a life that aligns with your values.
And a key part of that is setting clear boundaries.
Because when you value yourself, you're more likely to attract healthy relationships, right?
It's like setting a standard for how you expect to be treated.
The source gives an example of Claire, an entrepreneur, who prioritized her mental health by setting limits on work and delegating tasks. And guess what? Her business actually thrived because she was less stressed and more focused.
That's amazing. It shows how boundaries can lead to success in all areas of life.
So we've talked a lot about setting our own boundaries. But what about the flip side? Respecting the boundaries of others.
That's just as important.
How do we make sure we're doing that well?
The source has some great guidelines. First, listen without judgment.
So when someone tells you their boundary, accept it.
Exactly. You don't have to agree with it to respect it.
The next guideline is to ask questions if you're unsure. Like, hey, is this okay with you?
It shows that you care about their comfort level.
And finally, respect no as a complete answer. No means no.
No pressure, no guilt trips.
The source gives an example of Emily respecting her friend's decision to decline a last-minute outing. Just a simple act of respect that strengthened their friendship.
It's those small things that can make a big difference.
Exactly. And it's interesting. The source emphasizes that respecting others' boundaries isn't just about what we say, but also about our actions.
Right. It's about being mindful of how our behavior impacts others.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of boundaries, I hope you're walking away with a renewed sense of empowerment and a toolbox full of strategies to create healthier relationships.
Boundaries are essential. They really are. Not selfish, not controlling, but essential.
They're about setting clear expectations, communicating our needs, and honoring the needs of others.
And it's amazing how the source connects boundaries to feeling more empowered, especially for women.
It's like when you set those boundaries, you're saying, hey, I value myself. I deserve respect.
And that can change how other people treat you.
It sets a standard for the kinds of relationships you're willing to have.
The source highlights all these women who totally transformed their lives by setting boundaries.
Like Olivia. Remember Olivia, the project manager?
Right. No more work calls after 7 p.m.
Right. And Maria, who finally set those financial boundaries with her sister.
Yeah, their relationship actually got better because of it. Healthier,
And then there's Claire, the entrepreneur, who made her mental health a priority.
By setting limits on work and delegating.
And it actually helped her business thrive.
It's amazing how boundaries aren't about depriving yourself. They're about creating a life that really reflects what's important to you.
And the source talks about how when you value yourself enough to set those boundaries, you tend to attract healthier relationships.
It's like you're putting it out there. This is how I expect to be treated.
So we're not just taking care of ourselves, we're kind of creating a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Inspiring other people to do the same.
It's pretty cool when you think about it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into boundaries, I hope you're feeling inspired to set some of your own, whether it's at work, in your personal life, or even online.
Boundaries are a journey, not a one-time thing.
Right. You got to keep checking in with yourself, adjusting those boundaries as needed.
And remember, you have the power to create a life that feels good, that feels authentic.
What really resonated with you today? What area of your life could use some stronger boundaries? Tell us about it.
We'd love to hear your stories. Share them on social media, send us an email, whatever works for you.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with your friends. And if you have ideas for future deep dives, let us know.
We're always looking for new topics to explore.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you next time.